Hello everybody and welcome to my new mini-series, I'm still not sure how to classify it yet. I was thinking about doing this last night and I figured, hell, I am not doing anything right now, so why not record the first episode? It's basically where I take a look at a specific character or a specific event or a specific storyline or basically a specific lore topic, so the videos aren't going to be very long, and I tell you how I think it would be awesome for all players involved, Horde and Alliance. If I bring up the Alliance, I will try to bring up the Horde. I will be as non-biased as possible, but how it would be awesome for all of us going forward. And it's not going to be so much as rewriting a character or something's history, it's going to be how I think they should progress further from what already exists. And as such, I think a great title for the series is Necroxis Has a Daydream. And today, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow lore nerds and friends, my daydream has to do with the Gnomes and the Forsaken. Now, I have talked about this several different places and several different videos. I've talked about it on MMO Champion, if you ever see me posting on there. I actually was just talking about this yesterday. I've talked about it on But Wait There's Lore, I've talked about it on my own channel, and it basically has to do with the upcoming conflict that I feel like Blizzard really needs to address between the Gilneans trying to retake their homeland and the Forsaken pushing back against them, because obviously they're not going to want the Alliance to reclaim a giant piece of territory so close to their capital. Now you might ask, Necroxis, why did you say Gnomes then instead of Worgen? And I feel like instead of what we got in Cataclysm, which was the Worgen kind of being the anti-Forsaken force that the Alliance had, that were great in guerrilla style tactics and hit and run style attacks, I feel like the actual counter to the Forsaken and their apothecaries and the Blight is actually with the Gnomes on the Alliance's side. And I feel like if the Alliance needs to go and retake Gilneas, which is what Varian says at the end of the Siege of Orgrimmar, Blizzard did kind of say they were going to try and do that before the next expansion, but they then, kind of totally abandoned it when Warlords of Draenor was announced. But I feel like if Varian's going to try at some point in the future, maybe after the Iron Horde is defeated, retake Gilneas, he's going to need, most importantly I feel like over every other faction, the support and the expertise and the knowledge of the Gnomes. It seems just utter perfect sense to me that how we counter the Forsaken Blight as an Alliance character is to use the Gnomes. They're the most technologically advanced race. I would even say more so than the Draenei, even though the Draenei do have kind of spaceships and stuff. They more are kind of using the Naaru's technology instead of actually knowing how a lot of it works. Because you never see the Draenei like building new technologies, you just kind of see them using what they've had for, the past 10,000 years. So I feel like the Gnomes are the best race to actively pursue, maybe even a cure, but definitely countermeasures to the Forsaken Blight. And honestly, there is kind of already a sub-faction of Gnomes who could very easily deal with it. They are known as the Survivor Assistance Facilitation Expedition, or SAFE, SAFE. They are the Gnome organization who was responsible for basically detoxifying and de-radiationifying. I'm great at words, trust me. They are the ones that are responsible for basically making sure all of the Gnomes that could be saved from Gnomergon who were poisoned with radiation were. And if you make a new Gnome character, you will go through the initial 1 through 6 storyline, and you will see the SAFE team. They're the ones responsible for detoxifying your character from radiation that they have as a gnome who was found basically in the depths or in the bowels of Gnomergon. They don't really go into it too much about your character's specifics history, but it's kind of like you were discovered amongst the survivors, but you had poison from radiation, and now they're going to cure you, and they do at the end of the quest chain. And sure, the device they use to cure you at the end of that quest chain does break, as most gnome technology and goblin technology tends to do. There's no reason why they couldn't remake it. I feel like it makes so much sense, and it would be so cool to give Gnomes an injection of badass and an injection of importance into the story, both for the Horde and the Alliance. Honestly, I feel like it helps everybody, it benefits everyone who enjoys the story when the less presented factions become important once again. This is why I love the Draenei's role in Warlords of Draenor. I was so worried that they were going to be sidelined as characters for some other faction, or maybe even no other faction besides the Orcs. But even Horde players I know who have played the beta really enjoy the Draenei's role, and it's because when you bring a faction that hasn't been important back into the limelight, It doesn't matter what faction you play, it's a new twist on the story. We get to see a perspective from a faction that we haven't heard from in a long time, and the Gnomes are a perfect example of this kind of thing. And I feel like they would be a perfect counter to the Forsaken Apothecaries, who have been always presented as these incredibly powerful, intellectual, just masterminds of poison within the Forsaken. The Royal Apothecary Society, guys, is so immensely and powerful of a sub-faction within the Horde. It's a reason why Putris, when he betrayed everybody, he killed everybody at the Wrathgate with the Forsaken Blight. They're such a powerful faction, and the Gnomes have that kind of intellectualism. They have that kind of technology. They know how to do that kind of thing. You want a perfect example? For those of you who played in Wrath of the Lich King on the Alliance's side in Howling Fjord at Westguard Keep, you try and counter or perfect the Forsaken Blight so you know how to counter it from the Alliance's perspective. A gnome who's drunk off her ass. She's totally wasted. She perfects the Forsaken Blight for you while she's totally drunk in the tavern. That is why I feel like the Gnomes are the perfect counter to the Forsaken's Blight. And just how awesome would it be to see the Forsaken and their abominations fighting against the Gnomes and their machines, their pounders, whatever kind of technology that they have. It's such a odd mismatch, but it works so well if you think about it from an intellectual battle perspective. The Gnomes are always paired up with the Goblins, but I feel like that kind of shtick is done. It's been played out, we experimented with it, it didn't really go anywhere. And I feel like the true battle of the minds within the Horde and the Alliance are the Forsaken and the Royal Apothecary Society versus the Gnomes. And I can't present it in any other way. I feel like whenever the retaking of Gilneas happens, if it ever happens, because I'm holding my breath at this point that they're ever going to get back to it, but I really feel like the Gnomes should be the ones taking points. Mechatork needs his time in the spotlight once again, and we can finally deal with the looming the threat, if you want to call it that, but I would consider it more kind of a Mary Sue, Deus Ex-ish kind of problem the Forsaken have, because the last time we see them, they're kind of really powerful. You leave it on a note of the Forsaken have basically taken over all of Lordaeron. What is stopping them from taking over the rest of the world? And the storyline kind of ends there, and we go and deal with Twilight's Hammer and all that other stuff. But I feel like if Sylvanas really was the way she acted in especially the Anderhall quest chain, she would not be stopping. She would try and conquer the rest of Gilneas, even though at this point Gilneas is considered abandoned. Take the rest of Gilneas and then start pushing into Dwarven territory. And I feel like whenever we land on the beaches of Gilneas, because that I think is where it should start if we ever do it, the Forsaken should be marching south from Silverpine Forest, and the Alliance should be landing on the shores, whatever shore, because the Cataclysm kind of wrecked Gilneas, but the Alliance is landing on the shore of Gilneas, and the first people who come out of the Alliance's boats have to be the Gnomes. The Gnomes in their machines, the Gnomes with Safe. You can repurpose the Safe sub-faction into dealing with the Forsaken Blight, trying to find a cure, at the very least trying to counter it. I would love to see the Gnomes in their radiation suits that have been repurposed to resist the plague, so there's an actual faction of players, Horde or Alliance, who just don't die immediately when you get hit by the plague. I would just love to see them marching out in the boats to meet the Forsaken in the middle of the battlefield. And I'm not even saying that the Gnomes have to just overwhelmingly win or even win at all. I'm saying it would be such a cool matchup, and I don't know why Blizzard keeps insisting on pairing the Gnomes with the Goblins. It can't just be because there's a short joke in there somewhere where both factions are short and they're kind of goofy and they both invent things, so they're kind of kooky and must always be paired up with one another. We've gotten past that kind of juvenile storytelling. That's how the storytelling was in vanilla. We are way in Warlords of Draenor now, where there are awesome characters like Wrathion. They've revamped some of the faction leaders like Lorthamar and made them truly badass. They changed characters who have been one way for so long, like Jaina Proudmoore, and they made her like jaded and kind of hating the Horde. Although they kind of fixed that with war crimes, but I still like I liked that old mad Jaina. And we have gotten past this juvenile storytelling. And I really feel like there was great narrative potential with a Gnome versus Forsaken fight. And that is my daydream, everybody. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. If you would like to see some kind of twist on this, or would you like to make any suggestions that would be cool to this matchup, let me know. But otherwise, I will see you next time for whatever daydream I have next. because as someone who talks about the lore, thinks about the lore, writes about the lore as much as he does, I do have a lot of daydreams. Thanks, guys. I'll see you then.